everybody. Welcome to Energetic Conversations. It's good to be with you all here today. Today, we're going to be talking about my and I's spiritual journeys and how we've gotten here, what we've learned, how those spiritual journeys have changed and evolved, and just that very interesting trajectory of energetic development. So, Bias just joined. I'm going to add her now, and we're going to get it going on. It's really good to be with you all here today. Really, really good. And so, let's get Maya. Let me get started. See how she's doing. And likewise, any question you have for us, put them in the bot. Maya, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Sorry for the... Oh, there we go. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Amazing. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. I'm doing well.
Good.
Yes. All about spiritual journeys today.
Yes, here we are. This is like... I don't think we'll even be able to convey everything that we could convey, but we're going to give it a good shot, I think.
Yeah, we're going to give it a good shot. And we'll see how things go. So I guess we'll get started. What has been your spiritual journey so far? What were there spiritual practices you had when you were younger? Obviously, there's spiritual practices you have now. Kind of share with us the trajectory you've been on in terms of your energetic development.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up when my mum was alive, and she died when I was 9, nearly 10. I grew up in a Hindu family, so she practiced Hinduism. My dad is more of a, I don't even know, like atheist, agnostic, who knows at this stage. But my mum had like an altar in her, like a cupboard that she had in her bedroom, and she opened it up, and there was a tray, and there was an image of Mataji, which is Mother Goddess, and she takes many forms in Hindu sort of spirituality. So as many of you may know already from Hindu spirituality, there's like thousands of gods, thousands of different avatars of gods. I'm probably not doing justice to it, but Mataji herself is, I view her as the Divine Mother, and she comes in many forms. And one of the first forms I saw was what my mum had as a picture. And I believe it was either Amba Ma or Durga Ma, and it's this fierce goddess who rides a tiger or a lion and has different tools in her hand. So one is like a conch shell, which she sort of blows into, and then there's like weapons, but there's also tools of peace. And so the first image of God I ever saw was the Mother Goddess, and a fierce Mother Goddess, not just like, like love and light, like, oh, it was like literally she's riding this like kick-ass, like ferocious big cat that's like roaring away. And then she's got weapons. I mean, like for little me, anyone who knows who I am, this was like the dream. This is like an energy that I feel I carry like a fractal of. So I was like, this is God. So then fast forward a few years, my mum dies, and then I'm already being private schooled. I was lucky enough to be private schooled, although there were huge problems in that. But the school that I went to was predominantly Christian, so we were in assembly and everything. There was always like a hymn book and these like Christian prayers and stuff like that, and like they distorted the Lord's Prayer. Actually, the original Aramaic prayer is different to what we were singing, and so I got this like distorted view of like Christianity, and very much like the poverty, equating poverty with righteousness, like that kind of stuff. So at the same time as having like a Hindu background growing up, I then was like going to school and having this kind of distorted Christian, patriarchal, colonial crap, basically. Then my dad, when my mum died, my dad remarried. Very quickly he remarried, like ridiculously quickly, a born again Christian woman. So everything changed. She was very dominant, very sort of, well, she was abusive, but her kind of religious beliefs like permeated everything. And so like I started thinking like maybe I'm a Christian, because all she ever spoke about was Jesus, but like the distorted version now that I look back, it was like this very patriarchal, distorted version. And it was almost like a Jesus that you use to bypass all of your issues. Like, so she was abusive and she has a lot of issues, but instead of going to therapy, she used to say things like, oh, why should I have therapy? I've got Jesus. I was like, no, you need therapy. You need some sort of help. But like, it was always like, oh, I've got Jesus, Jesus. And it's like, so that's then it was like this very kind of, my Hindu background was almost like cut off. And then I had this like very predominant patriarchal Christianity, which was about a male God. And then like, not just Jesus, but like this higher God that was like judging us, and things like turn the other cheek, and you know, like if you're slapped, just let them slap you like 20 more times, and like just lay on the ground and just, you know, self-flagellate, you know, like that kind of like, you know, that kind of thing. And like, so then I became a Christian. I wasn't baptized, I wasn't christened, although when I did say this when I said to one of the church leaders that I wasn't baptized, she was like, oh, you must be, because otherwise you're not going to get into the kingdom of heaven. And me having like other Hindu members of my family, I was like, this doesn't feel right inside, because like if that's what you truly believe, then all of the good people in my family and all of the rest of the world who aren't Christian are just going to go to hell. And so that's when, like, probably in my early 20s, I started to like really question the church more, and like really kind of like start to like detach myself, and like really just start getting angry. And eventually I walked away from the church. But this is after years of being I went to a church school eventually, because this stepmother of ours like thought that it was a good idea. You know, it was very immersive, this Christian experience. And the school had a church, and everyone was just linked to everything. And our teachers were like leaders in the church. We weren't allowed to read like Harry Potter and like stuff like that. Like, it's hilarious because it's so ridiculous. So early 20s, I walk away from the church, and I started just following my own path. I started to there was no plan. There was no like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I know which direction I'm going. I just kind of left it to my intuition, and just like, okay, what do I want to read about? The things that I started reading about was the divine feminine. And I actually bought a book called The Return of the Divine Sophia, and it was about Mary Magdalene, Isis, who was a goddess in Egypt. And it was very much about the matriarchal rulership, which was before the patriarchal rulership, and how the mother was always worshipped, the divine mother. And so I learned what I had always known inside was the truth. You know, the divine mother had been left out. And I sort of returned to my roots, because the first image of God I ever saw was the goddess. You know, and so I started learning more. I really started connecting with Mary Magdalene. I started to learn more about how she had been a key player in the life of Yeshua, who I refer to Jesus as Yeshua, because I don't like to think of Jesus as the way that he's been kind of portrayed in this very patriarchal colonial way, this white capitalist colonial, you know, God. So Yeshua I see as like a brown-skinned, you know, revolutionary who had a woman equal by his side as a teacher, and taught that we should follow our own heart and our own path and go inwards and know ourselves, rather than let the outside world tell us who we are. And someone who was in great danger, you know, he was actually killed. So, you know, this guy wasn't playing around, like he died for what he believed. So that's, I mean, I love Yeshua. Like, Yeshua is like a huge part of my life, but Jesus, I don't even know, like that idea of Jesus is not part of my life. So it's just been an interesting journey, like stripping away like what I was told. So Mary Magdalene was, I believe, Yeshua's partner. she was believed to have written a whole scripture which was hidden and was found as part of the Nag Hammadi texts, hidden in Egypt. She was also said to be a high priestess of goddess Isis. And so there was all of this like incredible things that I started to like really learn and like uncover. And I was like, this has been hidden deliberately so that the patriarchy could have its way. And look at the state of the world. Look at how we've disregarded the mother and the divine feminine. And look how we've distorted the divine feminine to mean just like love and light and just bypassing and forgiveness. Look at what we've done to forgiveness. So, I mean, like, I'll go into that later because I could just go crazy about all of this stuff. But so started learning about the divine feminine. And then as that developed, I started to realize that this idea of patriarchal religion was very much about ascending and detaching from the body. And it was very structured. And there's nothing wrong in that. But I think that was the only version of spirituality that we had been given. It's like, even if you looked in, even Hinduism had become very patriarchal. Like everything had turned into this like leveling up. You need to ascend to this level. You need to do this. And then only then can you be holy. And it was so super structured and patriarchal and like overly masculine in its kind of energy. And I started to realize the divine feminine for me was to go into the depths, into the darkness, into the womb. The womb is darkness. You don't know what's going on. When you're a baby in the womb, like you just have to keep, you know, obviously like the consciousness is compromised, but like you're in darkness. You know, it's a trust in what is holding you. But it's messy, it's chaotic, it's unpredictable. You get shot out into this world, like you don't know what's happening, you know? So like, and then I looked at like Mother Earth and I looked at how we refer to her as the mother, and she creates storms, she creates tsunami, she creates tornadoes, all of the things that I'm very drawn to. And I was like, this is ferocious, this is destructive, this is chaotic, but this is very much still God. This is very much still the divine. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be happening, right? So I was just like, okay, like there are forces within me that feel very dark and destructive, but it feels very loving at the same time. And this really this all flows really well. And then eventually I found the goddess Kali Ma, as I call her, or Ma Kali. And looking at her image, it scares many, but I felt relief. So for anyone who has seen Kali Ma, she is scary. Like her picture, she's got a severed head in her hand. She's got Shiv Bhagwan, God Shiva, on the floor, and she's got one foot on him. She's got her tongue hanging out. Like she just looks so like dark and ferocious. Kali means black, and she is the destructive force. She's the goddess of destruction and time and false, like destroying illusions. And I was like, I really resonate with this goddess. Like I look at her and I feel like I can breathe. And at the time I couldn't really explain that to anyone because a lot of women around me were still really afraid of the dark side of the feminine and thought that was evil, that was witchcraft. I mean, firstly, I would identify as a witch. If anyone views witches as wise women, which is where witch is actually the word witch originates from. Yes, I'm a wise woman. Yeah, I claim it. If that's the closest, you know, I live alongside the elements of the earth. Yeah, okay. There's loads of us out here that do that. You know, we work with natural forces and energy. Yeah, okay. But a lot of Ma Kali's practices do. A lot of Hindu practices. They work with the earth as well. So there's actually a huge correlation between pagan practices, any earth honoring practices, whether it's Hinduism or paganism or anything. We use ether, fire, water, air. It's all the same. And we use mantras and we use energy and it's all blessing. So I started to realize, oh, this is like animism. This is kind of like working with the earth as the divine. And so, yeah, I feel like I could go on and on, but like there's more to this, but I will let you chat first because I could, go on forever.
We can listen to you go on further. Like honestly, like it's great listening to you, and just about the trajectory you've been on spiritually, but also too just the wealth of knowledge that you have and experience you have within these topics and within these practices. So beautiful listening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for listening. Thank you all for listening. And how about you? What about your spiritual journey?
Well, as you know, and I think many people who know me know, I was brought up in the Christian church, and my family is very integrated within that religion. And so my father is a pastor. He's actually a bishop within the Christian church. And when I say Christian, from the doctrinal practice of Pentecostal apostolic Christian church. And so my father is a bishop. My grandfather was a bishop. My great-grandfather was a bishop. My great-grandmother was a pastor. So very integrated. And that's just on my dad's side. And my mom's side of the family, very integrated within the Christian church as well. Not necessarily in roles of pastoring, but in terms of attending and being devoted to the Christian church and the Christian faith. So I was brought up in that very integrated. Like I said, my family is with that. So I think that's kind of the very foundation of my spiritual journey. And so, and not one that I necessarily despise or hate or anything like that. There have been, I think, positive things that have come out of that genesis for me in terms of my spiritual practices and spiritual trajectory. But obviously being brought up in that, there's also a myriad, an array.
A smorgasbord.
Exactly. Whatever word we can conjure up that resonates, of distortions, possessions, projections, toxicity, and just overall very abusive doctrine that has impacted me even until this day. And I've had to do a lot of work to detangle myself and detach from that type of abusive doctrine. And I genuinely believe, I wouldn't be surprised if that's work I do the rest of this lifetime. I really wouldn't be surprised. I think that is just how, just how I think, impactful and I think spiritually coercive and, that it is. And these types of doctrines can be. And so brought up in the Christian church. Being brought up in church is an interesting thing, particularly the Christian church, because it's particularly as a Black person, we have, again, it's really kind of challenging to speak about this without looking at colonialism, without looking at the transatlantic slave trade, without looking at, patriarchy, without looking at white supremacy, because these things are all intrinsically linked. Yeah. So, one of the reasons why, Black people around the world, are so integrated and so hell-bent on staying integrated, for many of them, not all, but for many Black people around the world, on staying so connected to Christianity, is because I consider it to be very much a trauma bond with Christianity. It's because it was a religion that was indoctrinated into us, and for many Black people, we had to be Christians. This is what the slave owners were kind of like breeding into us. And for many instances during slavery and even post-slavery, oftentimes the only spaces that Black people were allowed to congregate were for church. And so that was the only place where they felt like they had power, where they had a sense of community, where they felt like they had a sense of relief, where they, and so during some incredibly harsh and horrific and traumatic, time, so there is this bond that I personally believe that Black people begin to have with this religion that was not theirs, originally, generally speaking. And the version of that we're being taught was not theirs at all, because, and so again, this is where white supremacy comes in, patriarchy comes in. And so, and I think even on a baseline level, if your oppressor is okay with you, like, is enslaving you, but the only thing they're okay with you really doing is practicing this faith, I think that's a massive red flag right there. Like, like, that is a very big concern for me, and if that's the only way that they're letting you congregate and kind of like be together in community while you're enslaved, and there were other ways that, Black people and slaves were allowed to, to be together in certain ways, but it was always for the benefit of the slave owner. It was always for the benefit. It wasn't out of generosity. Oftentimes, it wasn't out of, the kindness of the slave master's heart. Oftentimes, it was for the production, and the benefit of the slave owners, their business, and ultimately white supremacy as a whole. So even if we look at, Black people's relationship with Christianity from that context and that lens, they're a massive red flag. But yeah, I was brought up in that. Like I said, my dad's a pastor. And so, again, I am fortunate in the sense that my parents, excuse me, as people and as parents, are not, they raised us very liberally. We did not grow up in a very suffocating religious kind of house in that way. There were elements of that, like, when we were really, really young, like not listening to certain music and not, perhaps watching that. But at the same time, too, that did not last very long. We were raised in a very liberal, very democratic household. And don't get me wrong, we were raised very different to like how some of my cousins were raised and how the rest of the family were raised. And that was, my parents even say that was a very, conscious decision that they chose. And so, and I definitely think, my siblings and I, our lives and our personalities and our character reflects that in positive ways, I think. But regardless of how I think parents choose to raise you, if they're still connected to this doctrine and to this, institution, that is going to permeate, throughout, the family, and even if you don't want it to. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's, that has been a real challenge for me. So, issues of, patriarchy, white supremacy, sexuality, abuse, these are issues that I've really struggled with in regards to the Christian faith, and issues that I still struggle with. Where I am now, I've divested from the Christian church. I've divested from the Christian faith. I have denounced the name of Jesus, and from the white supremacist colonial version of who Yeshua was. And so I do not use that name. I do not adhere to that name. I want nothing to do with that, because that's my personal choice. And so that's not me trying to say that other people need to do that. That's what I'm talking about, me. So this is me about me. And for me, that's what I've done. And I felt like that has been what's necessary for me to gain, my liberation from that institution, and from that abusive doctrine. And that's where I find myself now. I divested officially from the Christian church in 2020. You were someone who was supporting me with that. And, it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing trajectory that I'm on. And so now, when I first left the Christian church, I was kind of free falling, kind of just like, what do I believe in? What do I not believe in? And that's okay. And for those listening who, may be tied to different religions, when you first leave, you may be free falling and kind of just piecing together what's what. And you kind of, learn along the way what resonates for you and what doesn't resonate for you. And so, but what I will say before I hand back over to you, Mai, is that, while being in the church, what I did appreciate is that I got a very good understanding of the energetic realm, a very good understanding of how to do the energy work, because that's what my family, that's the legacy and the ancestral practice of my family. Even before European interference, it's working with the land, working with energy, working with spirit. That is what the gifts I believe that operate within my family, and the gifts that operate within all of us. It just happened to be that, due to European interference, that then got channeled and funneled through the lens of the Christian church. But I'm very thankful that I grew up in church, and even my life and my profession as a speaker and presenter is very much, has been inspired and elevated by being in the church and listening to great speakers every Sunday, hearing them, speak and understanding how to use energy and and to transmute energy through words and through feeling and through music and through dance. And those are the aspects of church and that I really do value, but those are, if I look at it for myself, those are African principles and ways of being. Those are just indigenous ways of being, and so I don't give the church too much credit for that, but, because that's just who we are as people. And so it's not to say that everything within the Christian church is, evil and wrong. I'm not saying that. I think it's a very sophomoric and naive way of looking at this or talking about that. But, again, I find the doctrine very abusive, and I've released myself from that doctrine. And that's where I find myself now, I consider myself to be a mystic, a shaman, a high priest in my own right. And I've reclaimed that for myself, through the power of, through myself and ancestors and spirit and my guides. That is that is the legacy and the part of the lineage that I carry on. And so my work now as a shaman, as a mystic in general, and very, like I said, very importantly, as a high priest, that work that's the work that I'm here doing spiritually right now. And guiding myself and guiding those who choose to engage with me in that way. So yeah, I'd say that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. And it's quite the journey,
I mean, Maya, because we speak all the time, but come on.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, how long is a piece of string? We could talk about this. We could talk about this all year.
We should do like a marathon, just 24 hours, and people just dip in and dip out, and we're just like continuously talking about this, because the amount of time Daniel and I have spent talking about religion and divesting from the church, it's huge. But thank you for sharing that. It's really important for other people to hear that, but also just for you to share that and have it be witnessed by people as well. And Jesus himself, when you were talking about Yeshua himself wasn't even a Christian. And this is one thing I always come back to, I remember you said like you felt more like Yeshua and more Christ-like having left the church. And I've seen people say that so often, and I felt like that too, because actually divesting from colonial structures. He lived in colonial times. There was the Romans were kind of like colonizing Jerusalem and surrounding areas, and so he lived in very oppressive times, and there was a lot of hiding around and that kind of stuff. And so it's just interesting to think, a lot of Christians, especially hardcore ones, believe that they're very close to what Yeshua was like, or Christ, but it's been distorted so much. It's actually very, very different. And yet there's whole institutions and structures around it, and the amount of abuse that goes on, and the abuse of indigenous people. Just want to take a moment to say, and I've said it before, but like on Turtle Island in Canada and America, what is now known as Canada and America, and in what is now known as Australia and New Zealand, the amount of abuse in the name of Christianity, where people are like thousands of people, if not millions, have been murdered in the name of Jesus, and the Christian church, and how many boys have been molested and how many different things have happened. I think it's just such an interesting, nuanced journey when you start to realize, like, okay, what do I believe? What don't I believe? What do I want to divest from? Like, what are people using this for? Yeah. And I think when you were talking about like how you view yourself, a shaman, a high priest, a mystic, it's such an interesting thing, because like I struggle with how to label myself. Sometimes I'll think of myself as a high priestess, sometimes I think of myself as a mystic, an intuitive, a witch. And I don't think I've come to any sort of conclusion, because similar to how I am inside, I actually just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. So, I love Sufi mysticism, which is a mystical branch of Islam. I love Hindu mysticism. I love Christian mysticism. There's a lot of Christian mystics out there. In fact, gnosis means inner knowing. And Jesus and Yeshua and Mary Magdalene were a lot about gnosis, like inner knowing. And so I love aspects of Buddhism and different things. And I think the issue can arise when we identify too much with one set religion and then think that everyone else is wrong. I think that's the issue, because all of the paths lead to the same truth. All of the genuine paths lead to the same truth. And that is that the divine is everywhere and we are the divine. And it's all one consciousness. And we've come onto this, we've chosen to incarnate onto this earth to like develop spiritually and to evolve in our chosen ways, collectively and individually. One of the other things I believe is in reincarnation.
Mm.
And when I was indoctrinated into the Christian church, that was kind of brainwashed out of me. But I actually grew up in Hinduism. So reincarnation is like one of the main tenets of Hinduism, and many other, even Buddhism, reincarnation is spoken about. A lot of the holy scriptures in even Christianity, they refer to aspects of reincarnation, people coming back, especially holy men coming back as different holy men, So I really believe in that, and that has provided me with, it's made my life more full and more complex, but also like really, really like the tapestry of my life has become more dense in that sense. It's like, ooh, am I working through issues in this life that are linked to a past life? And sometimes I'll have like responses to things, and I'm like, this doesn't relate to anything that's happened in this life. My response to this situation, it's not just trauma from this life. Like, this is something, I've been here before, I know this. How do I know this information? Why am I feeling so deeply about this? Like, for me, opening up to the idea of reincarnation has opened me up to just a fuller idea of life. And this is just me. Like, anyone watching this, I don't care what anyone believes, as long as it's not harming anyone else and abusing anyone else. You do you. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to tell me what to do, and I don't want to be telling anyone else what to do. Like, I love the fact I can like read about different things and take what resonates and leave what doesn't. So yeah, it's been really interesting in that sense. So how does your spiritual practice look now on a practical level? Like, what does it look like on a day-to-day level for you?
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, you've said so much, Maya. Like, there's some things I want to loop back to, but no, no, definitely. And I similar to you, I identify and kind of call myself the shaman and the high priest, and and a mystic, and all these things. And it's one of those things too. It's like I identify with those things, and at the same time too, I identify with way more than those things. And like at the same time too, I'm way more than that. And I think they kind of help to kind of hone in, I think, a bit, and with the spiritual, with my spirituality, it kind of helps you to hone in a bit, but I'm so much more than those things. Like, I'm those things, and then I'm not those things at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just, I think, helps to kind of, I don't want to say the word conduit, but like, it just kind of helps to kind of channel, my spirituality in some way, because then there's also African spirituality that I engage with, and particularly Yoruba spirituality. And, and then again, toying with the idea of reincarnation, and, and just, I open myself up to a host of realities being true, and then also none of them being true at the same time, and I also, in some weird way, I also think that can also happen. Like, this can be true and not true at the same time, which sounds weird, but like, no. I hold space for all of it. Like, it's like, and like you said, I'm not here telling people what to do. I don't want to tell people what to do. I spent the majority of my life, people telling me who God is and what's true for me and what I should and shouldn't believe in. I'm not trying to do that. I don't want to do that. And like you said, the beauty of this thing is that people can choose what they want, as long as it's not abusing other people or interfering with other people. And that's kind of the social dance that we play within society of, like, being yourself, but then also too, where does that then start, you being yourself interfere with someone else being themselves? And so I think that's I think that's what part of what it's all about, and being able to take different things that resonate with you in different spaces. And I think that's a beautiful thing too. And, again, like, when I think we look at any religion, we have to look at, like, again, what is it being used for, and so again, as a Black man, and not just as a human being, I would say, but particularly as a Black man, I obviously am very adamant about Black liberation, and understanding the very unique and special way that Black people have been oppressed, And so, again, there's no way that I personally think that you can look at that or involve yourself in that work without looking at religion in some way, shape, or form. I just don't understand that. For me, that just, you have to. And so, again, like, you have to look at Christianity, you have to look at Islam as the two main players within that. So, again, like, and so when Maya's saying, like, what have these religions been used for? The whole reason why we even had the transatlantic slave trade is, is because we had all these other slave trades previously. And so the reason why, African people specifically were being, chosen to be enslaved, that really comes from the Arab Muslim slave trade, which is the first time in history that we see religion being used to, justify the enslavement of African people specifically, And so, again, we see that, and then the transatlantic slave trade. One of the reasons why that slave trade is so heinous, all slavery is. But it's kind of this amalgamation of all these different slave trades of the past. The Greek slave trade, the Roman slave trade, the Arab Muslim slave trade, and then you get the transatlantic slave trade. And it's like, cool, we're going to take the worst bits of all of those and then put it together, and then here we go. And so the state of our world definitely reflects that. So again, as someone who again is very adamant about Black liberation, I have to be able to look. I have to look at these religions and see the ways in which they've been used as a mechanism to oppress Black people, Black and brown people, and people in general, even white people, and and cause those distortions, possessions, and projections. But very specifically for Black people, I'm at a place right now. I'm not sure if, as a Black man, I can be liberated while still attached to these religions. And that's just me speaking about me. I'm not talking about anyone else. I'm like, how can I, in the ways that they've been administered and taught to us as Black people? Because a lot of times they often subdue us as Black people, and yes, they have been also the catalysts for, certain, movements and progress to some degree. If we look at the through the lens of the civil rights movement. But again, this is going to probably go down a whole different tangent, which I'm not going to go down right now. But again, if we look at the African American civil rights movement, again, that was a movement that started to be about Black liberation. It started off with that we are concentrated and adamant about Black liberation, and that movement then became about right. The right then, we want to be liberated from oppressor, and then that got usurped into being now we want the right to go to the same schools as our oppressor, to marry our oppressor, and which again is to me in 2022, I look at that as a very serious form of mental illness. But I understand the times that that we were in back then. So again, and for most of those civil rights leaders to come from the Black church, that is not a coincidence. I honor Martin Luther King Jr. I love him. I honor him, and I'm thankful for the work that he's done. But again, I do think that in hindsight, he was used as a way to usurp that Black liberation movement. And again, I don't want to get too far into that. That's a whole different IG Live. But what I'm saying, particularly for the Black people who are listening to this and who are going to listen to this, you really have to interrogate these religions and understand the ways and the mechanics in which they oppress and subdue us mentally, emotionally, but also spiritually, the essence of who we are. I said, so that's really important. And again, I'm not here attacking religions or anything like that. But again, we have to very specifically look at Christianity and Islam because of the ways that they've been used. Not because I hate Christianity and Islam, but because that is the historical context of which we have to use these things for. So I'll put a full stop there. That's a whole other IG Live where we can talk about Black liberation, Black and brown liberation, and politics, and we can go into that and everything. But what my practice looks like now is working a lot with the land. I'm very thankful to my Aunt Rachel and to you, Maya, because you are two women in my life who have really helped me to ground within ancestral practices and really helped to usher me into this space that I'm in now, of connecting with spirit, connecting with myself, and connecting with ancestors and the land and the divine feminine. And I'm very thankful to you all for that. So, like I said, my Aunt Rachel and you, Maya, you have been key and instrumental in really helping me to be liberated from the patriarchal possession and projection and distortion of who God is for me and the divine. So reconnecting with the divine feminine is one of the first things that I did in that transition. And I think it's one of the things that helped me to transition out of the very patriarchal, abusive Christian doctrine and institution. And that work for me, particularly as a man living in this world, I think it's integral work to do for all of us as men, but particularly for me, I'll just speak about myself. Knowing the feminine nature of who spirit is and God is, understanding that and understanding the different sides of the feminine and honoring the feminine within myself. It really starts there, honoring the feminine within myself, nurturing the feminine within myself and understanding the ways that I've been trained as a man to hate the feminine within myself and then projecting that out to hate the feminine within women, which is part of the patriarchal structure right there. I mean, it's like almost the the heart of the patriarchal structure is that to despise the feminine first within ourselves and then within women. And so I think my spiritual practice now looks like, connecting to the land, connecting to spirit. I do, whether you want to call it prayer, whether you want to call it meditation, I do both, I would say. And prayer for people, for me, it's just, it's not about, doing crosses and, going east, going west, it's not about that for me personally. It's about really, I think it's intentions. It's about thinking on good things. It's about speaking to spirit, speaking to my guides, speaking to my ancestors. I call my ancestors in. I have an altar right here that you all can't see. It has stones on it. It has crystals on it. It has pictures of my ancestors on it. It has, leaves on it. It has different things that I foraged throughout the surrounding lands and lands that I've gone to, and so that's really important for me. But also too, my role, like I said, specifically for me as the shaman and the high priest, that is just something that I've taken a lot more seriously, and so I've been really fortunate this year to be able to do rituals, in California. I've done rituals in Dartmoor. I've done rituals here in Bristol, and those have kind of been rituals where I have assumed the role and position of the shaman and the high priest, where I'm leading and guiding other people in ritual to connect with our ancestors and connect with spirit and the land. And for me, that's really important. So again, I do see my role taking my role more seriously in that way. And it's interesting because my dad and my family do that through the lens of the Christian church. And I do that through the lens of just being, connected to land and to spirit, to Mother Earth and the divine feminine, and so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I know that probably sounds very clunky and maybe a bit vague, but, it's kind of hard sometimes to describe my particular energetic and spiritual practices because they're very kind of like the things I feel and that I do, but sometimes putting language around them is not always the easiest thing.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's really hard it's like we have all the words and we have none of the words. Exactly.
But thank you for bearing with me on that roller coaster. But yeah, how about you, Maya?
Well, firstly, thank you for sharing all of that and just going from the macro as well to the micro, because it is all connected. Mm. It is all connected. And essentially this is a decolonizing process. We haven't mentioned that word, but it is a decolonizing process, decolonizing ourselves, our bodies, our minds, hearts, and our spirituality. Mm. So I would say, I was thinking about this, and I would say, this is going to sound so cheesy, but I do various spiritual things throughout the day, but I honestly think there's not very much that I do that isn't spiritual because not because like, oh, I'm some holy person. It's more just because I view everything as spiritual. Like, okay, say for example, I'm drinking out of this cup. This cup is made of clay, and little did I know when I ordered it. I ordered it because I wanted to drink from something that was going to be good for my body because it's clay. And so drinking from clay is apparently very good for you. And it's also the earth. I wanted to connect with the earth and have the water and the earth combine. And then I found out once it arrived that it's actually from Gujarat. This is my land. So I didn't even know that when I ordered it. And I'm like drinking out of my land every single day. And the water from Mother England is joining Mother Gujarat. And so like all of this for me, all of it is just so spiritual. Like even just something as what people would class as mundane as like drinking water. To me, it's sacred. Everything is sacred. I have symbolism everywhere. Like for example, even on my coasters, there's the star, and the star symbolizes so much. I'm not going to go into everything that symbolizes, but everything for me is like a mystical, an invitation to like dive deeper. The things that I watch, the things that I do, in terms of like a practical day-to-day level, every time I wake up, you might be able to see it behind me, but there's like an altar. And so on this altar, I have a few different things that I have. I have a picture of my mum and my brother and me when we were younger. This is my beloved late mum. I have money. I have pine cones, rose petals. I have a statue of Mirabai, who's a mystic poet. I'm a mystic poet, and there's a lot of similarities that I find with myself and other mystic poets. There's like a kind of energy that I look at my poetry and I think, I didn't get it from me. Like this is very similar to like what they've said, and I haven't even read this poetry. So it's like, I want to remind myself of like who I am and that mystic element. I have, what do I have? I have candles. I have Ma Durga, like a statue of her, Ganesh Bhagwan, who's Lord Ganesh. And every morning I light the candle and I pray to my benevolent ancestors, to angelic guides, any spirit guides that are guiding me, any gods and goddesses who I feel connected to, like Ma Kali and Ma Durga and like a few others. And I thank them. I thank them for my health, my wealth, my joy. And then if I have any issues or something weighing on my heart or something I want to ask them, I will talk to them about it. And I thank them at the end. So I kind of leave it there and like give it to the divine. And so that's like how I start my day. And then throughout the day, even the things that I do, like this is spiritual. Like no matter what we're talking about, EC for me is a spiritual, whether we do consultancy, which we do, or whether we have an IG live, all of this for me is part of my spiritual practice, because I believe I'm here to be of service and to help people, especially people of color, be liberated, and for Mother Earth to have for us to live in harmony with Mother Earth, and for a balance between divine feminine and masculine energy. So there's nothing I do in my life that kind of doesn't contribute to that. Mm-hmm. Even the mundane things. So like every day I'll go to the forest and I connect with the trees. I connect with the sort of I believe there's elemental beings. We can't see them, but there's life everywhere beyond the veil, I believe, and so I connect with the spirit of the trees and the beings. I do energy work, so energetic practices. I release everybody's energy from my energy field so that I can be the fullest version of myself. I call my energy home so that I can be in my power. It's just constant, Daniel. It's just absolutely, I mean, that's why I'm exhausted in a way, because sometimes I go too hard and I just kind of like overdo it. And I think my issue is I'm like so devoted. And it's like so 24/7 when I sleep, when I eat, like it's just constant that like I forget to just take a step back and just like engage in something very mundane, like actually mundane, which is still spiritual. Everything's spiritual because we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, but like just having a laugh or like just completely zoning out. I think sometimes my issue is like I just can't like get that balance right, so I'm gonna try and do that more. But what else would I say? I mean, I could just go on forever. I do meditation, but for me meditation looks different to how it's been portrayed once again by sort of patriarchal spirituality, where there's like different levels, and like once you've reached this level then you've reached this, and I don't like that. Like I personally, for me, I don't like that leveling up, like structured way of patriarchal spirituality and religion. So for me, I was telling you this morning, I have blocked energy in my body. We all do, from like whatever traumatic experience that we went through. At the moment, I'm having a lot of discomfort, energetic discomfort in like a certain area. And I have been concentrating on releasing that energy, but that has been my spiritual practice, like releasing those blockages, because I know that it's caused by the energies that I've absorbed in the world around me, like patriarchy, colonialism, racism, and so it's all gathered in this particular part of my body, which happens actually, it's my womb space. It's my womb space, and so I'm learning to kind of get into my body and really feel it and feel that discomfort. So it's less like here, and it's not even in my heart necessarily, but it's like I concentrate and focus my energy on that area. So a lot of my spiritual practice is about like very refined, subtle energy work. Like I don't know how to even describe what I do. It's really hard because I've developed it over time, and like no one really taught me properly. Now I'm part of a mystery school and I do get taught more about how to work with these subtle energies, but I just developed my own way and it works for me before then. And so that's why I truly believe that we all find our own way. What works for me won't work for other people, and vice versa. And so, I just developed my own stuff. I I hope that answered that question.
No, definitely. I mean, so much of this, I mean, you and I understand each other very well. And so there's a lot of things that you and I, that we don't have to share with each other verbally, that we just
Yeah,
get with each other. And, so sometimes, articulating it, front facing can be challenging because it's stuff that again, but again, sometimes I think that is slightly colonial and patriarchal, of like having to actually find, like to intellectualize things
yeah,
so much. It's like actually sometimes it's just something you feel in your body and you work with in your body. And
yeah.
again, there's a beauty and skill to being able to bring language to it, which I think we do. But I hear you, and I think you've articulated it very well, actually. And
Thank
so,
you.
but yeah, some of these things again, they're not a lot of things that I think we've been taught. And if we have been taught them, we're still working it out for ourselves and putting our own spin on things. And so
Yeah,
again, and that's what we encourage. I would say that we encourage everyone to do is to find things that work for you, and you may remix it a bit. Just
yeah,
it doesn't have to look like anyone else's. And even when you do ancestral work, I love honoring certain traditions and ancestral practices. At the same time, too, make them your own. That's okay too. It's like not feeling like you have to again be anyone but yourself. Like again, and I think that's the thing that religion oftentimes does is like, okay, you need to be like this, you need to pray this way, you need to say these things and say this prayer at this time. And again, different religions are different, but I want people to be in the fullness of who they are, and again, whatever that looks like for you. And so I definitely hear that, Maya, and thank you for sharing.
thank you. And I just want to say as well on like adding on to your point, um, I think sometimes trying to put it into words, sometimes it can be
Mm.
beautiful, but sometimes I think it can get really distorted. So for example,
Mm.
religion is initially supposed to be like a structured form of spirituality, like a structured whatever, like a structure around like how we connect with God, right? And then it became distorted, and so then we started saying we're spiritual, and now spirituality has become distorted. I know you're similar. Trust me, guys. Like I'm not part of any spiritual community. Like I'm part of a mystery school, but this mystery school, actually, one of the basic tenets is it's your path. The whole point is liberating you from like having to follow anyone else, and it's actually about strengthening your intuition. It's not kind of ascribing or prescribing anything. And spirituality, the word has become so distorted and so like duplicitous, especially white spirituality. Don't even get us started. We should do a whole IG live on that, because like they've just taken like culturally appropriated, picked and chose so many things, and then just like pretending like it's theirs and made money out of it. And and people are using it to like abuse and bypass in all different, not just white spirituality, but all different things. I mean, look at cults. We talk about cults a lot. It's very scary nowadays how even a spiritual movement can turn into a cult. And
Mm.
I always say that it's not because of the thing itself, it's the energy that exists in our world that we haven't dealt with in ourselves. If I have a lot of, if I haven't done the shadow work, which means if I haven't looked at my unconscious biases, my repressed emotions, my trauma, things that I'm ashamed of, if I then start a spiritual group, I guarantee I will abuse these members. Like whether I do it consciously or not, it is going to be abusive because I have all of this like shitty kind of repressed gunk in me that isn't me. It's kind of all of the kind of external brainwashing and everything that I've taken in that I haven't like worked on. So I always feel like the inner revolution comes first.
Mm.
And often when I find spiritual groups, I mean, it's very, very rare. I just assume that there's abuse going on. I find it very hard to imagine that there isn't, because I don't believe enough people have done like that level of shadow work yet. So I kind of stay clear of spiritual groups, because I think being perceptive to energy, it's like I could go in and within half an hour, I've pinpointed like exactly what's going on. I can see all the dynamics and I just feel a bit ill, like a bit like, oh, like get me out of here. Even with the best intentions, like, it's just become a real shit show out there. And the divine feminine, for example, has just been absolutely, I mean, if you just type in divine feminine to like Instagram or like online, you're just going to find a whole bunch of crap that like isn't actually in alignment with the divine feminine. It's being used to like exploit, to gain money, like all of these things. And so it's sad, but it's also just something to be discerning of for anyone watching, you know, like, I think because so many of us are we've all been spiritually bankrupt in a way. We've all been, we're so desperate for a connection with the divine. And that makes a lot of us vulnerable, especially people of color. And, you know, then we look outside of us to the nearest thing and the nearest nice, kind looking person that seems loving. And there's a tenner penny out there. Such a like British face. Tenner penny. But you know what? Okay, there's shitloads out there. Tenner fucking penny. When I like went sort of time traveled back into like the early fucking 1900s. Tenner penny. Sorry guys about that. So like you like they're everywhere. It's literally now it's saturated, and not just that, but like any genuine spiritual Instagram account has now been copied. So people are out there now trying to literally pretend to be these genuinely spiritual people, and you get like, I've had tens of people like just trying to imitate one spiritual person. So like that's the climate we're in. So I would just say discernment, and the discernment comes from following your own inner voice. And it can be hard at first because we've been trained to not listen to our own inner voice and externalize that authority to God, you know, like this patriarchal man in the sky that like judges everyone and like whatever and hates everyone. And it's like, actually, we haven't our power has been externalized, and so we actually need to take it back. So even if you have a little inkling, oh, actually this is my intuition, and you also have a part of you that doubts it, still allow the doubt, but give that little voice some space to breathe and just listen to it, even if it's very faint. That is spirituality for me, because you are divine, I am divine, we are all divine. And so you already have a lot of knowledge within you of what is right for you and your path and what is right universally. If we didn't know if we weren't connected to a higher power, when we see laws being passed like this ridiculous abortion, you know, like anti-abortion laws, if we just went by man-made laws and we all just like truly believed like that was the truth and like, you know, man is God, we'd be like, yeah, cool, like anti-abortion, yeah. But no, there's a bigger voice within us that we know this isn't right. There is a louder voice within us. Now, who is that? What is that part of us that knows, even if a man-made law is passed, this is still wrong? Even though colonization happened, this is wrong. That's a universal knowing. That is something deeper than like what we've been told. I've never been taught the universal law. We didn't go and get taught like greater rights and wrongs at school. We just got taught man-made stuff, you know. So like this is like, I would say, question where that knowing comes from within you, that like knows this is wrong, this is against humanity, this is against Mother Earth. You know, like that's what I would always encourage people to look within and go, who is that speaking? You know, that's true power. Because then if you know, people can't take that away from you. That is power. And if we all just had that, you know, the world would change tomorrow. Yeah. Someone's commented, being raised in liberal UK society tells us free will is important. It does. I think but it's also duplicitous, because we don't have free will. Like, especially as people of color, like we have free will, but within certain limitations, which was built on colonial, racist, patriarchal structures. So we do and we don't, because even a lot of the laws here are based on like Christian, like there's a lot of like Christian, even anti-abortion laws, which are in America, not here, but it's based on like Christian doctrine. So it's kind of like yes and no. There's like a duality to it, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. You know, yeah, and it's everyone finding this out for yourselves. And I love what you said, Maya, and you said it pretty well. And definitely as someone who is, again, has divested from certain religious spaces, particularly the Christian institution, being able to hone in on that voice that's inside you. Again, we've been taught so much to not trust ourselves. And I know that is very much one of the things that I picked up on from being in the Christian church, is not being able to trust myself and needing someone outside myself to rely on to be able to trust what they also say is also within me, which is the Holy Spirit, which is this weird dynamic. I mean, again, we could go into that and it's just whatever. It's not even worth it at this point, but another day. And, you know, again, but learning to trust myself, you know, that's one of the most important things that I've learned, you know, and it speaks to what you were talking about. So I think that's one thing, is trusting myself. And look, it's a challenging space to be in. You know, I think like you said, you know, we've all been so spiritually bankrupt, and it's kind of like the reality and, you know, of being colonized, you know, and the reality of being enslaved, and these realities of, like, you know, trying to find our way in a way, trying to find our way in a society that has exploited us and has, you know, abused us to such large degrees, and then given us false representations of a variety of different things. False representations of love, false representations of spirituality, false representations of a host of different things. And so, again, trying to find out what's real for us individually, you know, it can be very challenging because our society is propagating so many different falsehoods. And so it's the same thing with my particular, you know, journey with Christianity. It's kind of like, okay, here's who God is. And it's like, well, that's, again, I'm now having to do that work to be like, well, that's not true for me, but what is, you know? And so, again, yeah, it can be a very challenging space to navigate. But like Maya said, it's about listening to yourself. It's all within you. It's all within you. And it's like, and again, that's a very cliche thing to say, and I understand that. But, you know, again, it's about listening to that voice. And again, that's one of the things that I've learned to do over time. It's like, for me personally, it's like, I know when I'm in the frequency, and I know when, like, there's an alignment going on, and I'm listening to the voice of spirit. And sometimes that comes, you know, I'll be watching Netflix and, like, something will be said and I'm like, it resonates. I'm like, I know that spirit speaking. Okay, go do this. I'm getting messages, like, all the time. You know, it's like, it's these cues and this messaging that happens through daily life, and understanding the synchronicity of life, and, you know, the ways in which spirit speaks to us. And that's what's guided me most of my life, and particularly since leaving the church, that's what I've really had to rely on, you know. And I'll tell you, it hasn't really steered me wrong, you know. It's like, you know, it's even down to, like, energetic conversations and working with, you know, Maya and I working together, and, you know, again, it's a call from spirit, you know, and then you have to listen to how your body feels when you're in these different situations. That corroborates with what you think spirit is telling you, you know, like, I'm not perfect. It's not like every single time is 100% right. You know, you have to be able to, you know, interpret and, you know, have discernment, like Maya was saying. But again, that's a skill and a muscle that has to be exercised, you know, and that's where talk about a spiritual practice. It's practicing it, you know, and understanding, you know, the different dynamics of the universe and how spirit works, or God works, whatever resonates for you. And so it can be really challenging, because I think so many of us are still stuck in the abuse phase of this. And again, that's one of the reasons why, you know, I think if Maya and I didn't do anything else, if we could just help people be released from religious abuse, I mean, I'd be like, well, great. That'd be it. Honestly, that'd be it. I'd be like, honestly, like, even if you haven't really gotten to, like, the black liberation, black and brown liberation and all that, I'd be like, you know what, cool. If you can just be released from religious abuse, you're at least on your way. Yeah. You know, you're at least on your way. Because again, I'm not sure how much of that other stuff can happen while still being so religiously abused. And again, a lot of stuff happens in tandem. I'm not saying you have to do this and then do that. I think that, again, that's a very structured way of kind of looking at it. But again, trying to be liberated and doing all this liberation work, and, you know, without doing the religious abuse work in the ways in which we've been, the essence of who we are and our spiritual self has been abused. You know, again, it's that bridge between the energetic and the 3D. And by the 3D, for those, it's everything, you know, that we can see, you know, sense, touch, feel, smell, you know, this dimension, you know, it's that bridge between the two, because it happens energetically before it happens in, you know, in the 3D. At the same time, too, the 3D plays a very important role in how the energetics is manifested in a way that materializes for us to see, sense, touch, feel, see, you know. So again, you know, and a lot of the conversations I have with my friends now, Maya and other friends that are around me, you know, it's like, I was laughing with one of my mates the other day. We were at a pub, and I was like, bro, like, if we fucking talk about the energetic, we talk about the 3D, and it's just like literally that has become such a big part of the conversation I have with the people around me, and it's like being able to understand the energetic realms and like how the 3D like manifests from that. That to me is probably a big part of my spiritual practice. You know, it's like understanding, you know, again, the 3D manifestations, but the energetic links to that. You know, what's going on in the energetic? What can't we see? You know, because the 3D really is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, it's like underneath all of that is all of this energetic, you know, these energetic things that are going on. And that's the religious abuse. That's the colonization. That's the white supremacy. That's the patriarchy. That's all the abuses. And that's the stuff that we can't always see. But then it materializes in the 3D as, you know, anti-abortion laws, you know, as rape, as, you know, all these, you know, as slavery, you know, as, you know, all these different things that have happened, you know, and apologies for anything, you know, if anyone's triggered by those things. But again, that's the 3D, you know, manifestation of these energetic dynamics that are always going on. They don't ever stop going on. They're always going on. And so even when I look at that through the lens of my family and certain things like that, it's like, you know, it's the subtleties of things, you know, like you put my nine of like, you know, you you put my,
don't put us in a room because we will actually analyze and figure out the energetics going on everywhere.
And other people may look at things and be like, oh, this is great. This is beautiful. This is amazing. And Maya and I will be like,
he's got some repressed rage. He like she's been abused and he's you know, like all sorts of stuff we'd be going on about.
Literally, you're like, and that's why it's dealing with the energetic, you know. And again, like that's where Maya and I's skill really lies. And again, the energetics without the 3D, I think you're missing it too. And I think you see that a lot within the spiritual space. And one thing I just want to say before handing it back over is picking back up where Maya was talking about cults. That also is a place you really want to be very mindful of. So many people end up in cults without knowing it. So many people almost end up in cults, you know, before they realize that, you know, there's an energy there or something that that doesn't resonate with them. And that's really important to know. Like there are political cults, there are business cults, there are spiritual and religious cults, there are cults within the fashion industry. Almost every industry you can think of, there are cults there. There are friendship cults. Like again, and I at some point we definitely will do an IG live all about, you know, recognizing cult energies and particularly subtle cult energies, you know, and that it's so important to be mindful of that because those energetic dynamics will really, I think honestly, they will rob you of like, you know, your spirituality, and I think abuse you in ways that I think again are very complicated sometimes and layered to get yourself out of, you know, and understanding the ways in which cult energies manifest and how you welcome in certain cult energies, and, you know, the way that like having a lack of integrity within a spiritual or religious space welcomes in cult energies. And so a lot of people, you know, for instance, even in my own family, they'll be like, you know, they'll be like, Daniel, you know, because I'm in a space now where I'm talking about, you know, my experience within the Christian church, and I do think that I was raised in a cult, personally speaking. I'm not saying that my whole family needs to agree with me on that, but I personally believe that. You know, for me, I because I understand, it's my definition and my understanding of how cults operate, and they operate in a lot of different ways. It's not just one way, and like, or this one certain structure in which cults operate. They operate in a variety of different ways. And actually, if I look at, you know, some of the ways that I have been, you know, the abuse that I've endured and the abuse that I've seen and been a part of, you know, and by that I mean been like experienced, you know, I'm like, yeah, this is cult-like behavior. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown on cult where like someone is like, you know, drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, you know, and everyone's dying. That's not the only way a cult looks. A cult looks a variety of different ways. And being able to understand that and recognize the subtle cult energies that operate, you know, even right now, like in my family, you know, and like in the religious, you know, institution that my family is connected to. And right now, there's certain members of my family who are like, Daniel, I don't believe in that, and, you know, you're arrogant for even saying that, or whatever they have to say. Cool, that's fine. I'm not saying that other people need to believe in what I believe in, and I don't think I've ever been like that. But, you know, those energies, again, when we look at integrity, I have seen through my personal experience, and this has been the story of my life, really, I've seen and had a front row seat to the correlation and understand the correlation of people who are out of integrity, who are propagating religious and spiritual doctrine, and then how the cult energies start manifesting. For me, there is a very clear through line, Because if you're someone who has some type of spiritual, if you're in a spiritual leadership position, but you're also out of integrity, I'm telling you, that is a very easy way for the doors to start opening for cult energies to start coming in and manifesting. I've seen it time and time again. I've lived it. That's part of my life experience. And I've seen how spiritual leaders who are out of integrity, that is, for me, that is a very clear way to start, start being like, hey, this is getting cult-like. This is actually getting cult-like. And again, we're not all drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. People are free to leave if they want to, because people think that if you're in a cult, you can't ever leave. No, that's not the only way cults operate. They operate in a variety of different ways. And for me, like I said, if you want to stay in whatever dynamic, religious, spiritual dynamic you're in, do that. I'm not invested in that way. But I do care about people. And so again, if you feel like you're in that space or you are being abused in that way, look at that. And, because you don't have to stay in that. I was brought up in it. I've left. And while things are very challenging in a lot of different ways, my life is much better for leaving than having stayed in that, because anyway, I'm not going to even go on anymore, but yeah.
We can do an episode as well on like cults, like you said, because there's a lot to say there,
Yeah.
And I would just round off what you're saying by saying that, like, anyone who's if you're so deeply invested in someone else's spiritual beliefs, what does that say? And if someone is so deeply invested in your spiritual beliefs to the point where they're trying to make you believe a certain thing, you've got to question that. I have my beliefs. I don't care what other people believe. It's not my problem. As I said earlier, it's only my problem if it's seeping into my life and harming me and it's harming other people. Otherwise, each person is unique and individual and should have whatever journey they wish to have. And if that is part of joining a spiritual group, fine. But if someone is so invested in say, if I was so invested in what you believe, like, Daniel, you need to believe this, just because I believed it, that's a red flag right there.
Massively.
That is a red flag right there. Why should you believe what I believe? What difference does it make to me? Do you know what I mean? Unless you're trying to harm me based on your beliefs, that's when I put my boundaries down and say something. But we have different spiritual journeys and beliefs. You and I have different, I don't, in the most loving way, I do care and I don't care, because it's your journey is your journey. Mm. There is enough respect and alignment for us to be on parallel paths where we're walking alongside each other and I'm waving at you and you're waving at me. We're not on the same fucking path. Mm. That's what's so beautiful about life. We're not robots, Yeah. And the world is diverse. So are we. We're each individual and unique. So why are we all trying to conform? How's that going for us all? Let's look around, so it's just learning to discern red flags, basically. And to bring it back to the self continuously, I think that's such an important part of the spiritual journey. Okay, this person is saying this, but how do I feel? How do I feel? What's my heart saying? What's my soul saying? How can I align with my higher self on a continuous level, on a continuous basis? How can I align with my highest truth? Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. What's my highest truth, and how do I align with it? I think it's a hard thing to do because we've been so brainwashed with different messaging and all of this patriarchal, colonial, racist, capitalist crap. But that's true liberation. And I think for both of us, I think it's fair to say our spirituality is very deeply tied into liberation. The more liberated I am, the more spiritual I feel. Mm. The more free I feel, the more spiritual I feel. So it's actually the opposite of actually conforming to anything.
100%.
So yeah,
definitely. And I would just echo what you said. If you're in this is my personal experience, because you have to. I want to make sure I'm saying that, because again, I've already got family telling me all types of things. But cool. Anyway,
we both do.
So from my personal experience, and from this is what I personally believe. If you are in a spiritual or religious space where conversion, winning souls or having to convert people religiously to believe in what you believe in, like Maya said, for me personally, that is one of the very clear indicators of a cult. Why are we winning souls for who and for what? You already were in a cult-like dynamic already. And that's how cults need that to be able to not just live, but be sustainable, but to be viable. You need other people. You need recruitment into something. And that's a big part of cults is recruitment. So again, if you need other people to believe in what you believe in and to say this prayer, and if not, you're going to be eternally damned, and you must be baptized and born again, speaking tongues to enter into the kingdom of God, and all this different rhetoric. Already right there, from my personal standpoint, we're already in cult territory. We're already there, already. So it's like, off that basis alone, I was brought up in a cult. Off that basis alone, that's what I personally believe. And then you add in the abuse, and then you add in the financial aspects of it, and then you add in all these different things. Yes, I was brought up in a cult, and I have no problem saying that. I have absolutely no problem saying that. So that's just my personal belief. Again, and this comes from someone who comes from 4 generations of Christian pastors. I was brought up in a family where, like, my grandfather was, my parents, my dad and his siblings, the leader of their church organization told my grandfather how to parent them, told people what they were going to do with their lives, what professions they were going to go into. That is cult leader dynamics and behavior. The reason why certain family members have the profession they're in is because not my grandparents, not their parents, but because of the church leader told my grandparents what they were going to do, told them how to discipline them, held the deeds to their houses. That's abusive. That, from my perspective, we're not just beginning stages of cult territory. We're in the thick of cult territory, in the thick of it. And it's again like and recognizing that for myself was really challenging and really hard. And it doesn't make everyone evil and bad, but it's like, no, yes, I was raised in a cult, and like, that is a challenging thing to wrap your head around sometimes, but that is part of the work that I've had to do, and realizing that and admitting that to myself and allowing myself to accept that has been a big part of my spiritual practice moving forward. And it's released me from a lot of different things because I understand the dynamics of that. Doesn't mean there aren't great people there. There are. Doesn't mean there aren't loving people there. There are. Doesn't mean that I haven't been supported and helped by those people. I have. And I love those people. But again, if I can't recognize the cult energies that I've been a part of myself, how can I even do this work with energetic conversation? How?
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of us have similar experiences, that particularly Black and brown people. I know we have very similar experiences. So be very careful and wary of cult energies in any space you're in. And I'll just to reiterate, where you have to convert people to what you believe in. From my personal standpoint, you've already got one indicator of a cult right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would add to that by saying that any spiritual experience where you're required to put the authority outside of yourself, even on a base level, that in itself is a red flag. As in, like, if any group or any sort of spiritual practice is telling you to listen more to an outside force than your own inner knowing, that's a red flag. And so, like, that's how we get into these cult things, because spiritual abuse is so easy to happen. It happens a lot easier when we're vulnerable and when we don't trust ourselves and when we're brainwashed out of trusting ourselves. So for Black and brown people, obviously, like you've said, we've gone through so much abuse anyway. It's very easy to lead us into these situations because we're looking for salvation. But then we've been taught that salvation is outside of ourselves as another tool to kind of oppress us and to hold us as prisoners, especially in the Black community. So yeah, it's the inner authority is always you. That's the thing. Yeah, you have to know yourself. And that's why, going back to Yeshua, and like that kind of those teachings, and I know we have we have like similar feelings and also different feelings, but around Yeshua. But like one of the things I really appreciate about his original teachings is to know yourself and to know, to like go inwards, and gnosis, like Gnosis, which is inner knowing. And that's the path of the mystic, is gnosis, inner knowing, going within. And you find that I found that I knew more about life and about myself when I just went within for the answers than I did just listening randomly to like you said, church leaders or family members who were like, yeah, this is the way. And then it just always tanked. It was always terrible, because it wasn't my path. It might be their path, not my path.
Exactly. And our paths don't have to be the same.
you know?
Exactly. Just respect one another, for God's sake, literally for God's sake.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have gone quite over time, but I just hope that you all appreciated this conversation, because I mean, I've had a great time. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Daniel, for sharing all the wisdom that you shared and all the energy that you shared. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, we just hope that you all come away with something, and if not, that's cool too.
That's absolutely fine too. Live your life, be you, but just do what's true for
Yeah,
you. Just do what's true for
exactly.
you. You know?
Exactly.
Well, we'll see you next time. I mean, it sounds like we may already know what we're going to be speaking about next week. Who knows? Who knows? Because people being cults out here. People being
Yeah.
cults out here. So who knows? But it's been great being with you all. Thank you for holding space with us and for us. Sending you lots of love, and we'll see you all next week.
See you all next week. Bye.
Take care.